This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. Author Jonathan Allen says the Hillary Clinton organization has a number of blind spots. Is her use of private email for government business one of them? Former Obama economic advisor Jared Bernstein urges the Fed to be patient about raising interest rates. And Bill Press talks with journalist and author April Ryan about the Justice Department's report on Ferguson, Missouri. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Hillary Clinton biographer Jonathan Allen says it remains to be seen how much the email controversy will haunt her, but it is an example of why it made sense for her to delay announcing for president. And we say hello to Jonathan Allen, who is the Washington bureau chief for Bloomberg News, an award-winning reporter. He's written extensively about Congress and national politics, and he is co-author with Amy Parnes of the New York Times best-selling HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. Jonathan Allen, thanks very much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
It's my great pleasure.
The book you co-authored is now out in paperback. So what's different in the outlook for Hillary Clinton since the hardback was published?
I was going to say there's the outlook for Hillary Clinton may be a little bit different, from week to week. But since the hardback was published, I think, what we've seen, I think, is more Republican candidates than we might have expected. We always thought there would be a lot. The number of them is different. I think, since the hardback was published, we saw a rocky book tour for Hillary Clinton and some comments that she made that seemed to put her out of touch with the general American public. I think what we've seen is a rustiness as a candidate that was easy to forget after several years of her not being on the campaign trail.
It seems that within what some call Hillary land, there are all sorts of factions. The Bill people, the Obama people, the State Department people, and Hillary's own circle of longtime aides. Is this a help or hindrance to a presidential campaign?
I think it's good to get different perspectives, and you can be too insular at times. But I think, mostly it has caused them grief to have so many warring factions at all times. It makes everything, every campaign that a Clinton runs sort of ugly in public. And so I'm not sure that it ends up serving her well.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Jonathan Allen, Washington bureau chief for Bloomberg News, co-author of HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. You recount an incident in which Bill Clinton blew up at a pro-Hillary organization for attacking Chris Christie on Bridgegate. Why would that be a problem?
Well, it's sort of several ideas here. One is the basic iron rule of politics that you don't get in the way of an imploding enemy, that you could do collateral damage to yourself by being engaged at a time when they're having difficulty. So there could be a backlash against you for really pushing that issue. But I think also there's a more practical level, which is, sort of if you look at the way the Republican race, particularly at the time, was shaping up, Hillary Clinton and Chris Christie could really compete for a lot of the same donors in the New York area, maybe even some of the same voters if the Republicans were to nominate somebody on the far right of their party. You could see some Republicans who are Christie backers perhaps being Hillary Clinton backers. There's no reason to agitate those people who like Chris Christie. And then, then a third reason, and this may be the biggest one of all, is I think the Clintons have always regarded Jeb Bush as the main challenge for 2016, as the toughest Republican for them to beat. And Chris Christie siphons off support from Jeb Bush within the Republican establishment. So keeping him viable as a candidate is a good strategy for her. And then there's the simple fact that Bill Clinton seems to like Chris Christie. Christie's been part of the Clinton Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative events in the past, and so I think there were a lot of reasons to leave Chris Christie alone in the view of President Clinton, and not so many to go after him.
Well, and knowing what's at stake, and given that Bill Clinton's a pretty savvy politician himself, it's sort of surprising that he would do that, to make any sort of noise in that regard. Is the Hillary camp at all scared of Bill Clinton being out there, or does he still have enough luster to where he does her a lot of good being out there on the campaign trail?
I think it's how they use him. President Obama was very good at using Bill Clinton in 2012 to give programmed speeches. The one at the 2012 Democratic convention in Charlotte was a sort of great piece of political theater, very Bill Clinton-esque, and then to use him on the stump. But Bill Clinton has caused problems for Barack Obama, and he did for Hillary Clinton in 2008 when he's off script. So putting him in front of reporters or in a place where they're going to be able to ask him questions is not, at least historically, has not been helpful to her campaign, and is not as helpful to anybody else. So keeping him on script is important.
Mm-hmm. Now, Hillary is almost an incumbent in people's minds, but won't she have to answer for the reset with Russia and other foreign affairs controversy like Benghazi, ISIS terrorism, relations with Israel and Iran? I mean, she's got a lot in front of her, if assuming, of course, that she is running.
Absolutely, and I don't think anyone has a perception that she's going to get a free ride from anybody. So, in terms of asking those tough questions, you'll get them at debates, you'll get them from reporters, you'll get them from voters at events in states across the country. So, she's got to be ready to answer them.
We're speaking with Jonathan Allen, Washington bureau chief for Bloomberg News, co-author of the New York Times best-selling HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton, here on americasdemocrats.org. Your book reveals a lot about how, as Secretary of State, she worked to promote American corporations trading abroad. At the same time, the Bill Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation has been very successful in raising money from corporations and foreign governments. Doesn't this spell conflict of interest in capital letters?
Yeah, to everyone not named Clinton. Yeah, I think there's a blind spot for the Clintons when it comes to raising money. I think that they perceive themselves to be above being unduly influenced, and everybody else looks at it and says, look, there's an inherent conflict of interest in raising money from people who have business before the government. We understand that in our campaign finance system, and to give another route to people to have access and influence is, I think, troubling to some voters. It's certainly troubling to ethics watchdog groups. It is troubling to some of the shareholders of the companies. I think this is an issue she's going to have to discuss at great length, and I think she made the calculation that the money was more important than the potential political pain of being accused of leaving herself open or vulnerable to conflicts of interest.
I mean, I guess you have the fallback that the foundation does all these great things, and does it really matter where the money comes from? That's, I guess, one take they could possibly have.
Yes, I don't want to get too far down this road, but there are a lot of people who do charitable work with questionable financial sources, and sometimes the public views that favorably, and sometimes they view it unfavorably. But just because you do charitable work doesn't mean that you're not doing anything other than charitable work.
I guess I'm just more interested to find out what she's going to say when all of these questions do come up. And along those lines, you recently wrote an article about Secretary Clinton flying on corporate jets at taxpayer expense when she was a senator. Then it came out that at the State Department, she used personal email to conduct government business, which, as far as I know, is against the rules, if not the law. How are these things going to hurt her, if indeed they do?
I think that remains to be seen a little bit. I think right now there's a lot of appetite among reporters to pop these stories out, myself included, and I think over time we'll see whether the public cares as much about that as the journalists do.
I'd be curious to see if it's helpful to get it out of the way now, and maybe get the fervor over with now before things really get heated, and maybe that helps her in the actual run.
Well, I think there's definitely you can see why, or you can see the wisdom right now of her not having announced a presidential run early in the process, because if she were a candidate right now, there'd be no way for her to avoid talking about these stories. And at the moment, she's able to do that through aides, and maybe hopes some of this will blow over.
All right, Jonathan Allen, Washington bureau chief for Bloomberg News, co-author with Amy Parnes of the New York Times best-selling HRC, State Secrets and the Rebirth of Hillary Clinton. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. We look forward to having you back again soon.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going, and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for Stand Up Democrats. Former administration economist Jared Bernstein says the recovery is working and will do better if the Fed doesn't slow it down by raising interest rates. We'll talk to him about that in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
Look out. The Supreme Court's Black Robe gang of far-right ideologues are rampaging again. The Supreme Klan is firing potshots at Obamacare, and their political recklessness endangers justice, the court's own integrity, and the health of millions of innocent bystanders. In an effort to override the law, these so-called justices have jumped on a wagon load of legalistic BS named King versus Burwell. But this case is a very rickety legal vehicle. It sprang from a frivolous lawsuit concocted in 2010 by a front group funded by such self-serving oligarchs as the Koch brothers, Big Oil, Big Tobacco, and Big Pharma. The chairman of the front group bluntly and rather crudely described the purpose of the lawsuit as a raw political assault on Obamacare. Quote, "This bastard has to be killed as a matter of political hygiene," he howled. "I do not care how this is done, whether it's dismembered, whether we drive a stake through its heart, whether we strangle it." So much for the intellectual depth of the King case, which was fabricated on a nitpicking interpretation of only 4 words in the 906-page healthcare law. The claim is that the subsidy provided by Obamacare to make its coverage affordable to all is an illegal backdoor bribe to force every state to allow their people access to a federal benefit they otherwise couldn't afford. That's right-wing Tommy rot, which was rejected by both the district and appeals courts, and even corporate interests have dubbed the claim absurd. Nonetheless, the gang of Supremes grabbed the case as a chance to wreak their own brand of ideological havoc on a law they personally dislike. This is Jim Hightower saying, by taking over this case, these Republican judges have openly become partisans, thrusting the Supreme Court itself into the forefront of the GOP's war against Obamacare and against Obama himself.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Why are Democrats and Wall Street so cozy? Economist Jared Bernstein says it's because investors see politics as just another market to invest in. And we say hello to Jared Bernstein, senior fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and author of the forthcoming book, The Reconnection Agenda, Reuniting Growth and Prosperity. Jared Bernstein, thanks very much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
My pleasure.
Always nice to have you with us. For a long time after President Obama got the Recovery Act in place, Republicans said it failed to boost the economy. We know better now, do we not? And what does the evidence show?
Well, the evidence shows that the Recovery Act worked much like we expected it to. And I don't just mean we in the White House. I was there at the time because folks might want to look at the outside forecasters who didn't necessarily have a political thumb on the scale. And take the Congressional Budget Office, for example. That's a group that's widely viewed as nonpartisan. They argued that the Recovery Act would generate about 2 million jobs and lower the unemployment rate by a couple of points relative to where it would otherwise have been, increase the gross domestic product, or GDP, the broadest measure of economic growth. All of that was widely predicted at the time by folks without a partisan bone to pick. And in fact, that's what occurred. The Federal Reserve also played a very important role at the time, and there were other measures. The auto bailout was obviously very important for the upper Midwest. All told, these measures helped pull the recovery forward. But before we pop champagne, we should recognize that many of these measures didn't go far enough. They didn't last long enough. The recovery was deeper than much of what we threw at it. The hole, if you will, the hole was deeper than what we used to fill it. And so it took a long time for this recovery to gain momentum. I would argue that it's only pretty recently that it's done so.
I mean, I think there are probably folks out there that would still say it hasn't happened. But income inequality and things like that. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there that are still hurting. I mean, they may be working.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, that's and so that's a very important distinction. When you think about the recession and the recovery, and what greeted President Obama when he took the White House in early 2009, it was what an economists call a macroeconomic cataclysm or nightmare. Not a technical term, but that's a perfectly good term. I mean, GDP was falling at 8%. That's historically huge. The first quarter of 2009, we hemorrhaged over 2 million jobs. So the first thing you have to do is get growth back. You're not necessarily thinking so much about distribution. You're thinking we can't even begin to think about reaching people with economic growth, people who haven't been reached by growth for a long time. We can't even think about that when the economy is contracting. So the first order of business is growth, but growth itself, macroeconomic growth, is necessary. It's not sufficient. And I would argue that the structural forces that have worked like a wedge between growth and more broadly shared prosperity were afoot before the Great Recession and President Obama, and they remain upon the land today.
Progressives have been pretty successful in pointing out the collapse of the middle class, that even Republicans are now making it an issue. Is that a good thing, or is this just some kind of a stunt by the GOP?
Well, it's certainly a good thing. Whether it's a stunt or not, we will see. And let me be very specific in what I mean by both of those. It's a good thing because these are real problems. I think it's one of the reasons you hear a lot of people talking about poverty and inequality who weren't talking about it before is because the underlying economy, this kind of macroeconomic recovery we were just talking about, is very much in place. So John Boehner every month used to get up and take the jobs report and say, another terrible jobs report. Obama is such a loser. Obamacare is killing everything. Well, they can't say that anymore because the monthly job reports look good. GDP is solidly growing apace. The unemployment rate is coming down. Well, what's left? Well, we still have, as you've mentioned yourself, lots of corners of this economy that growth has failed to reach. Poverty rates are too high and have been sticky. There's been stagnant wages for many in the middle class. So part of it is opportunistic. What can we do to just continue to tarnish the president? But here's the stunt part. If you hear people who are new to this debate, a guy like Mitt Romney, who didn't want to talk about inequality, and then for a minute there was thinking about a presidential run and did all of a sudden. If you hear Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, Marco Rubio, if you hear them talk about inequality and poverty, And then their list of solutions, the things they're going to do about it, are the same things they've been saying all along. And that's why we need lower taxes and less government. Then you know it's just a stunt. Then it's just the same old kind of trickle-down economic platform with some new words appended on the end. So I think that's kind of a good litmus test.
Almost like lipstick on a pig. Now, are there specific measures that can be passed in this political climate that could restore the middle class, you think?
Well, certainly.
The key there, of course, that can be passed, I think.
Yeah. So I've tried to think pretty hard about that space. Is that the null set? That is, are there ideas that you could write down that both sides might be interested in? And I think there are a few, and I'll speak to them in a second. But I think it's also important to remember that, I don't know if it's going to restore the middle class, but the Federal Reserve, which is largely an apolitical institution, has an important role here to play as well. They don't have to answer to Congress, and it's very important for them to be patient when it comes to the interest rates that they control. There are those pushing the Fed to slow the economy down before it really reaches the middle class in a serious way, and that would be a big mistake. So that's one policy measure that would be helpful. I think there are a couple that the D's and R's could potentially work together on. Infrastructure is one. In a couple of months, the Highway Trust Fund is going to be out of money again, and instead of having another one of these fiscal cliff battles, which we really don't need, as I've mentioned, we have an economy that's kind of doing a much better job of generating growth and jobs than it was a few years ago. So let's not mess that up. I think both sides would like to do some infrastructure investment. The question these days is, how do you pay for anything? And that's where almost every good idea goes to die.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Jared Bernstein, Senior Fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and author of the forthcoming book, The Reconnection Agenda, Reuniting Growth and Prosperity. Why, and not just Democrats, I mean, the president was kind of out on an island on this one, but he was ganged up on pretty good, forcing him to abandon his plan to reduce the tax break on the 529 college savings plan. Why was everyone so against it?
I think there are two reasons. One is that a lot of people with loud megaphones, whether it's journalists or economic elites, benefit from 529 plans. And it's not just that they benefit, it's that they're saving for their kids. And it seemed to them like the president was saying, I'm going to introduce a new tax penalty for people who are saving for their kids' college. And you can imagine how that would really get under the skin of a lot of people, especially, they say don't pick fights with people who buy their ink by the barrel. A lot of those folks were people with loud mouthpieces. So that's one part. And I suspect listeners who heard that say, yeah, why would you want to do that? And the answer is because the second part was never very well articulated, which is, in fact, the president's plan did far, far more. I mean, to a ratio of 50-1 in terms of dollars expended, did far more to help improve college access for middle and even upper middle income families as part of his plan. But that part just got lost in the mix. The 529 thing was a relatively small change, largely benefiting to pull back a tax benefit that largely benefited those at the very top of the scale to help those more in the middle class. But for those reasons, I think it never flew.
Mm-hmm. Can progressives be sure that Democratic leaders are not in bed with Wall Street?
Well, I think there are leaders on both sides that are doing all kinds of business with Wall Street. I mean, remember, I always like to think of these Wall Street folks, they're investors, and they invest money in order to get a return. And if politics is just another market that they can invest in. So there are certainly members of both parties who benefit from those kinds of investments. And I don't think you can assume that someone who has a D by their name isn't part of that problem.
Mm-hmm. And a couple of things here before we let you go, and we'll kind of jump all over. Well, we'll jump all over the globe, in fact. Recent elections in Greece, anti-austerity forces win. What does that mean for the European economy or for the United States?
Well, for the European economy, we're still learning and trying to figure out what that means. Initially, and these are things that are moving in the these are real-time developments moving in the news in recent days and weeks. Initially, the European forces that have to deal with these problems of the Eurozone were quite hostile to the outcome in Greece. Now, the Greek public decided enough. The Greek electorate decided enough with these harsh austerity measures. Yes, we were a country that became irresponsibly indebted, and yes, we were a country that did not mind their fiscal accounts. So I'm not saying that Greece is an innocent victim here. However, the extent of economic and fiscal punishment that the European that the European elites were meting out on the Greece public very, very predictably ended with this election that was, as you said, deeply anti-austerity. The question now is whether the European authorities are going to basically kick Greece while it's down or try to help them. Most recently, we've seen too much kicking. And if they keep kicking, Greece will leave the Eurozone. Ultimately, I think that might be very tough for them, but it might be better for them in the long run if Europe refuses to let off some of these anti-austerity measures. How that would affect us, I think that the impact on the Eurozone would impact American economics and probably have some dampening effect on our recovery. I think we'd be strong enough to withstand it, but it would not be trivial.
All right, and before we let you go, Hillary Clinton, do you think she will or perhaps should move more to the left on economic issues?
Well, I don't know. Interestingly, she keeps her cards pretty close to her vest. Most of what I hear Hillary Clinton say or stand for, again, she's been very careful, resonates in terms of, I don't know so much left-right as much as what you'd expect from, I think, a thoughtful person who's been in politics for a long time, who's thinking about this very problem we talked about earlier, which is we have an economy that's growing, but it's not reaching enough people. And she is especially sensitive, I think, to gender issues in that context. So I know she's thinking about ideas that would help balance work and family, ideas that would help help working people do better in a job market that hasn't always been so welcoming. And in that sense, I just think we'll have to wait and see where she's ultimately coming from.
Okay. Jared Bernstein, Senior Fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, author of the forthcoming book, The Reconnection Agenda, Reuniting Growth and Prosperity, joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. Jared, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure speaking with you. We look forward to having you back again soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. And this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, author April Ryan.
Being in Las Vegas for the last couple of days, I've missed the most recent White House briefings, but I don't have to worry about it because I know we're in good hands because April Ryan is there on the job. She is, no doubt, one of the hardest working, one of the smartest, one of the best reporters on the White House beat, covering the White House for American Urban Radio Networks. and author of the brand new book, The Presidency in Black and White. Hello, April.
Good morning, Bill Press. What did you win in Vegas?
You know what? Nothing gambled, nothing lost.
I do the penny slots, but
I had a good time. I love Vegas, actually.
That's great.
But I'm not a gambler. Hey, I want to get into the book, but first I've got to ask you, what's your take on this Justice Department report on the Ferguson Police Department yesterday? I mean,
well, Bill, you know I cover that kind of news, urban and minority American news, and we had been hearing for the longest that there was going to be some sort of shakeup, possibly for Ferguson and some of these other police departments around the nation that are practicing bias against minorities. And the far-reaching extent of this report was amazing. Many people that I talked to and listened to in social media were surprised, though, that all of this could be found, but they didn't charge Darren Wilson with civil rights. But at the same time, to hear that the justice system down there is being used for revenue, to ticket African Americans, to set the dogs on African Americans more so than any other group. I'm saying, is this the 40s, 50s, or 60s? This is 2015. I could not, as an African American, I just was shaking my head. But as a reporter, I said, wow. I guess in both instances I said, wow. But we had been hearing, little rumblings. Everybody is letting information out from the Ferguson Police Department to some other people in Washington. And I've been talking to people about it. And I knew something was coming down, but I did not know to this extent.
But, the insulting emails, right, about President Obama by members of that police force back and forth. And I remember I heard you say, 95% of jaywalking arrests, right, were young black African Americans there in Ferguson, and they were just using the black community to raise cash, right? And
that community, the vast majority of that community is not, I guess, economically well established.
Yeah.
And you're going to make your revenue off the backs of those who are already poor. That's pretty bad. And it just goes to the fact that people want to say that racism is dead. No, it's not. So we're still dealing with it in different ways, very cunning and subtle ways, in some ways overt. So the report, it goes along with what this administration is trying to show, that they're going to be known as the civil rights. This is the legacy piece, the rights, the civil, criminal justice, civil rights administration.
And when you mentioned, I was going to ask you about that, the Darren Wilson thing, the Darren Wilson decision coming on top of the George Zimmerman decision, right, 3 years later. And then, of course, no charges filed up in Staten Island either. It still looks like, April, it's okay to beat up or to kill. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. Yeah, no,
but
not
the
okay,
problem is you get off.
That's the impression you get from these decisions. What's going on?
Here's the situation. I've talked to so many former prosecutors, lawyers, to include Chris Darden, the former O.J. Simpson prosecutor. He said, it's police officers. Grand juries will indict anybody, but a lot of times the police department are in cahoots with a lot of the people on the grand jury or in that system. And the
prosecutors.
Yep. So therefore, he said, you will indict anyone but a police officer a lot of times. So it's just a sad state of affairs.
Yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs. And the Justice Department said it's hard to put civil charges against someone. And we knew this wasn't going to happen. We knew it, that he was not going to be charged with civil rights violations. But the signs were leading to that.
Right.
It's pretty hard, but they had some damning evidence in some other instances. But it's interesting. You get all of this evidence, but you can't charge Darren Wilson, but either way, nonetheless, whether he was charged criminally with civil rights or any other kind of way, we know what happened was wrong.
Absolutely.
That child was in the street for hours without any help.
Mm-hmm.
Just that alone. It was just a bad scenario, but, there's a day-to-day that we see that a lot of things have been exposed. I mean, you cannot continue to have problems and think that it will not powder keg and it will not be exposed. So what's done in the dark has come to the light in a lot of instances.
April Ryan's our guest. She is author of the new book, The Presidency in Black and White. You can follow her on Twitter at April D. Ryan. So tell us about the book. I mean, what an impressive list of people you've talked to exploring this whole question about race relations and the White House, which is not a new issue at all.
And Bill, that you hit the nail squarely. So many people, in doing what I do every day, and because it's open, people see it on C-SPAN or what have you, and it may play back on the great Bill Press show. People ask, why are you asking this president about race? Why would you ask him? Why not? Because every president has dealt with the matter of race in one way or another. In researching for this book, this is not just an issue that's happened with these last three presidents or with LBJ or with John Kennedy. It's happened for each president. So if you want change to come, that's where change happens from the highest levels of the land, particularly when it comes to race.
How much of the opposition to President Obama, whether it's on immigration or on health care reform or whatever he's trying to do, or on jobs, how much of it that concentrated opposition to President Obama do you think is because he's black?
A large portion, and I hate to say this, and I'm not saying this as a black person. I'm not saying this as a supporter. I'm not saying this is a person who doesn't like it. I'm saying this is someone who's researched this. There's a large portion of anything this president does that focuses in on race, because he is the president of America who is black, the first black president. So anything that he does, race and politics will always follow him. Knowing that, let's move forward. Then you have not just those, a lot of people in Washington, and I say a lot of people in Washington and people around this country who despise him just from his color.
Yeah,
so
no doubt about it.
Yeah, when I thought that the nation had changed when we saw that Obama was was elected, to president of the United States. And, I mean, I'll never forget that night in Washington when the election happened, and after Wolf Blitzer told the world that Obama would be the 44th president of the United States. I mean, the whole universe of Washington converged on the White House in this spontaneous gathering.
Yes.
And it was the most amazing sight. And then the next day, George W. Bush marked history. He came out in the Rose Garden. But the interesting thing is everyone was so proud of themselves. We've turned the corner. I remember, and I can't say the person's name, but it's a very high-ranking person within the administration right now. And they said to me, they don't want us here. I said, what do you mean? I said, they said, you keep listening to me. They don't want us here. They don't want him in that White House. And I said, wow, I couldn't believe it, because I'm seeing and feeling one thing. Everybody feels so great that we've put a lot of the racial negatives behind us, and we've got the first black president. But I'm hearing other things. They were hearing it before they had walked into that White House.
Wow.
So it's very interesting, the dynamics. And I don't call it a post-civil rights America, post-racial America. I call it post-Obama, because I think we have markers now in this nation. And we had the civil rights marker. Now we have the Obama marker. Let's see how things work for the black community or minority community during his administration, and what are the effects after. So I think we're looking now, once he leaves 2 years from now, a post-Obama era. So we are beyond post-racial. I think now we're in the post-Obama era.
Again, the book is The Presidency in Black and White. We'll have a link up to our website, of course, at BillPressShow.com, and also you can get it at your local bookstore or at all the great sites like Amazon.com. Barnes & Noble still in business, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
Stop. Yes, they are, and they're selling it too.
No, I get them mixed up. Borders is the one that went out of business.
Yeah, Borders.
Yeah, right. All right. So, April, are we going to have a briefing today with the federal government shut down?
Well, you know how a couple of weeks ago I was shocked that they said due to inclement weather we were not going to have a briefing. Yeah. So I know where I am. There's kind of icy snow mix and it's snow and it's sticking. So I'm going to tell you this: I don't think I'm going to be traveling today. I will be working from home, watching from C-SPAN and listening and doing everything else. So.
All right. Well, if they have one, I'll be there. I don't have that long commute, just a couple of metro stops, so I'll get there. But hey, congratulations!
2 hours each way.
Congratulations on the book. I am so proud of you for this. This is great work, and you'll see when you see the book the amount of interviews And the work that April has done on this book is very, very impressive. Thanks, April.
Thank you so much, Bill.
All right. Good to talk to you. See you later.
Thanks.
Okay.
Take care.
April Ryan covers the White House for American Urban Radio Networks. And the book again, The Presidency in Black and White. Historic book. Go get it.
That's all for americasdemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Jonathan Allen, Jared Bernstein, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For americasdemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate.